Is it too risky to buy real estate right now? All I can tell you is what's happening in Cabarrus County, North Carolina, although what I have to say does apply in other markets too. So grab a little sip of something, as my friend Bill would say, and let's talk about it. The first thing I want you to understand is that the risks are variable. Now here's what that means. If you live in the Bay Area of California, you've got entirely different market conditions than I have here in Cabarrus County, North Carolina. However, maybe you are in a coastal community in North Carolina. Your risks are different than my risks here in the Piedmont. Where you are has an enormous amount of impact on the value of real estate, or also how the real estate is going to behave over time. And that amount of geographic specificity, I would almost say it's inside your zip code, not just in a zip code, because right here I'm sitting in 28025, but in Concord, there are different parts of 28025. You've got the more rural section out off of 49 and Zion Church Road, and then you've got the in-town historic neighborhoods here off of Union Street and down into Beverly Hills, and they behave differently. This is one reason that a wise person does not get all of their buying information off of apps and off the internet, although, welcome to my YouTube channel, but still, you want to talk to somebody who is a super educated person in the market where you're looking. Now, in addition to that geographical risk, you're also going to have some value risks. Now, what impacts that? Well, it's a lot of information to take in, but I want you to consider the price spectrum. Do you have more risk on the high end than on the low end? You might, because at the high end of the market, and by that I mean the top 10%, so if you're looking at how we designate the high end of a market, most of us would say the top 10% price-wise is going to be that luxury tranche. Now, as you look at that area, what impacts that area? The investments market, because the folks who buy in the top end of the market tend to have a pretty good diversification of investments, but also they will slow down their purchases if the economic conditions get volatile, which that comes and goes. And we've watched that happen during the COVID market when everything was white hot. The luxury market was white hot too. But since interest rates have started to move around, you have a lot of people that are looking at their entire investment strategy and how that impacts their primary residence. Now, what about the lower end of the price spectrum? So let's take the bottom 25%, which in most markets, that's where the affordability is the highest. Well, in that area, you're going to have a lot of variability, because you're going to have some that are what might be new-ish neighborhoods. And by new-ish, I mean we could build affordably 10 years ago. You're also going to have some houses that might be 80 years old and are going to have some environmental concerns with lead-based paint and oil tanks in the ground, asbestos and lead pipes, the whole kit and caboodle. But if it's an older home that's never been maintained or upgraded, it probably lives in the lower end of the price spectrum. So in that area, you always have a wider buyer pool, because there are people that can afford that end of the market no matter what's happening in the economy, and they're probably not looking at the real estate as part of a huge investment strategy. They might be, but if that's a generational home, they're looking at their finances differently. Here's what impacts that end of the price spectrum is, of course, the availability of capital. So are the banks lending money? Is there down payment assistance available? What are the interest rates doing? Because if you're looking at a working class price point, you've got a lot of folks that are going to have a little more uncertainty when it comes to the jobs market when layoffs start to happen. All of that being said, when you have risk in the whole price range, you have to tell yourself, real estate's not an impulse purchase. That's very important to remember, because if you're going to evaluate risk, you should take some of your personal emotion and set it to the side. The second thing you want to ask yourself is this: how will I feel 10 years from now if I don't buy real estate? And I always look at that 10-year range, because y'all, we are living in a society where the average adult has already turned off this video for lack of attention span. And we're looking at a world where the average adult maintains a marketing message for 16 days before they've forgotten all of it. The idea of thinking about 10 years in a house is wildly unrealistic for a lot of y'all. But that's what you got to think about with your real estate, is how will I feel 10 years from now? I can tell you, as a medium-aged person, I wish I had bought a lot more real estate in my younger days. I wish that when I was in college and when I was starting at Florida State down in Tallahassee, which has grown in a crazy amount, I wish I had found the cheapest little old condo near campus and purchased it with down payment from my credit card or something. I didn't, though, because I did not think long term as a young person. I even wish I had bought more real estate in the last several years when we had this historically low, artificially low, frankly, interest rate environment, I could have purchased more real estate, but because I don't have a lot of risk tolerance personally, I didn't. Now, that does not mean I harbor a great deal of regrets, but it does mean when I look back, I'm thinking, Leigh Brown, you should have pulled the trigger. And in fact, I was talking to a gentleman outside the pizza shop last week. I was on my way to get my hair done, and he saw my name was on my car, so he rolled down his window and we started to chatting. And he was medium like me, and he was asking about the market, which people love to have conversations about real estate. And I said, don't you wish you'd have bought more real estate back when you were younger? And he said, don't I though? And so we got to thinking about how our own unrest can keep us from making good decisions. And here's why you want to think about why it's probably still a good decision. 10 years is a long time frame. However, we're in a country where there are always increasing opportunities. No matter what you think about the political environment or the societal issues going on, we have a demography here that has more people than we have rooftops. And that means there's going to be an increase in opportunities as long as we protect and preserve private property rights in communities. And so 10 years from now, how many people will there be that would like to buy your property? There should be some. And that's where we get to thinking about what that looks like over that 10-year picture, because this person who asked the question was also concerned about what should she be looking at for risks outside of value. So if we think about the value likely going up over a 10-year window, it may go down because frankly, if you had bought in 1998 and then fast forwarded to 2008 or 9, your environment might have been slightly uncomfortable with your price value. However, in 2023, the people who bought in 19 are pretty much all celebrating, and the ones who kept waiting and kept waiting and kept waiting have watched themselves get priced out. Now, we don't expect to have another COVID market, but nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition either. So let's look at that 10-year window, and let's just assume the prices go nowhere. Assume that it goes up and down and it winds up flat over a 10-year window. There are still reasons to buy real estate. And here's the first reason to buy real estate, regardless of what happens to the value. It's yours. You don't have to ask anybody's permission to paint your daughter's bedroom. You don't have to ask anybody's permission before you go plant some tomatoes in the backyard. You don't have to ask permission if you want to change out the mailbox. That really matters to a lot of people who have felt their own personal agency has been impacted in life. So think about that piece right there. Nothing to do with value, everything to do with you. The second thing you want to think about, over that 10-year window, prices go flat. What are the benefits to you? Well, in America, we have that mortgage interest deduction. And for most working people, that is the one big tax benefit that allows you the chance to get some breathing room in an era of increased tax rates. Now, we're not going to have the discussion about how taxation is theft today. However, I want you to know that when you have a boost for being a homeowner, that's a good thing. And I will tell you, as a realtor for the last 23 years, I've watched people get that first tax refund after they buy the house and they think, oh, I have some money now. What do I do with it? Well, I will tell the ones that need repairs on the house, take care of the asset. Make sure that you fix the rotted wood, fix the roof, make sure the HVAC is working. But the second thing I will tell them is, since you did not expect that money, use that to pay off the house a little bit sooner, because you don't have to pay interest for 30 years if you pay it off in 23. So just think through what you can do to put yourself in a better financial position. The other thing you should consider, in that 10-year window, value doesn't go anywhere. Every time you make a payment, you're knocking down that principal just a little bit. You're building equity, whether you want to or not. We might call that forced savings. But frankly, in an era where we all don't have as much discipline as we should, forced savings is better than no savings. So you're just chunking away at it bit by bit. Now, if you look at a 30-year mortgage, those first 10 years, you're not knocking away a lot of the principal. I get it. However, as you stay in the property longer, you start to build more and more equity, even if the value stays the same. But here's why that matters. If you're not living in this house that you've purchased with the bank's money, thank you, bank, you're living in somebody else's property. And that means when you're paying that rent payment, you're knocking down their mortgage. You're building their equity. You're just paying out of pocket. No interest deduction on your taxes, no chunking down of a note over time, and you still can't paint the bedroom without permission. And that landlord can take your rent and move it up at any increment that's called for in the lease. So you have even less control than if you own the house. So when you look at the markets and they feel out of control, stop and go push that stuff to the side and let's look at the realities of it. You should stay put And if you stay put, there's some really good benefits. I didn't even talk about the increased health benefits of being in the owned house, or your kids' increased educational benefits. There's so many things that impact your life when you're in a house that's yours. But here's the most important thing you want to think about. When numbers are up, interest rates are crazy, prices are up, and you feel really unsettled about the market, that's when you talk to me, your local realtor. I'll help you make a list of pros and cons. I've been Franklin all day long. And then we're going to talk to a local mortgage lender. And I don't mean somebody on the interwebs. I mean somebody that will come sit down with us at the conference table and talk you through the numbers. And I have great people just for that purpose. I like having locals because you'll see them at the grocery store too, and they shouldn't run from you when they see you. But instead, they're going to talk to you about your payment environment. They're going to help you figure out what you can stomach every month and still go out to eat once in a while and still go to Myrtle Beach whenever you'd like to have a weekend in the sand. When you think about that payment environment, if that fits your income, stop thinking about the other big picture things. What we're going to focus on is what matters to you, and that's going to be your budget. And then if you can get into a house that's yours where you can stay put and have all the other benefits too, it's all going to work out. Now, that's what's happening here in North Carolina. We are a growth market. I don't have a crystal ball, and if I did, it would not be biblical to use it, but still, I think our values are going to go up over the long haul because we have 4 wonderful seasons, we have a great workforce, we have access to interstates, and we have jobs coming here all the time. So there's a lot of good reasons in the big picture to buy here, but if it all boils down to a risk scenario that you can tolerate, that's when you and I should sit down and make a plan. It's that simple. And if you're not in Cabarrus County, if you're somewhere else in North Carolina, I got people. If you're somewhere else in another state, you're in Wyoming, Texas, California, that's fine. I got people there too. I will help you find that somebody that will sit down with you and help you take the fear out so you can make a good rational decision, because that's what we do. We're looking out for you and your American dream in the long haul.